Welcome to another session of our discussion on Homike Bhabha's essay of Mimicry and Man. As you all know that this essay is taken from his book, The Location of Culture. We are going to deal with certain aspects of the text. In fact, this is not the first installment of our discussion on Homike Bhabha's text. We have already discussed a very important quotation from the text where Bhabha was trying to point out the difference between being anglicized and being English. Now, before we move on to another topic of our discussion, I am going to talk to you about a very, very pithy linguistic difference that has been brought to light by scholars of language belonging to the third world countries who were exposed to Western influence and Western languages like English as a representative case in point. Now, Sahitya Academy had once brought out a book about Indian writing in English and Indian English for that matter. You see, one of the essays in that book was entitled Speaking English and Speaking in English. By extension, writing English and writing in English. Now just think about it. To speak English and to speak in English does not mean the same thing. Do not mean the same thing. I would rather say. Now, when we speak English, just as we speak Bengali or speak Hindi, there is an element of difference, because then we conceptualize the language proposition from the perspective of a native speaker of English. In a bilingual, bicultural context, however, as it was in the case of the colonies, because English had been imposed on them from above, top down, they had to learn it willy-nilly. We can refer to two languages, Norman French in the case of England after the Norman conquest, or Farsi in the case of a large part of India after the coming of the Muslims. So we can go backward in the history also. We can talk about Sanskrit, we can talk about the Indian languages that had been imposed upon the Dravidian and even before that on the Ostic peoples. So when we write in English or when we speak in English, this preposition in brings in an added implication, that of bilinguality, that of later acquisition of the language. This is what I would like to point out in the passage. Okay, one of you will read the next topic that we are going to discuss now.
So critically estimate Homike Bhabha's essay of Mimicry and Man, the ambivalence of colonial discourse.
Now, when we try to write a critical estimate of this essay, two very important aspects we have to highlight. One is mimicry, another is ambivalence. Because Bhabha has also subtitled the essay as the ambivalence of the colonial discourse, obviously we have to understand that the immediate argumentative context of this essay is the discourse of colonialism. And the immediate political as well as temporal context of the discussion must be the period of colonization and thereafter. The colonial period, so to say. Now, as I have been trying very hard to make sense of the fact that colonialism meant a cultural encounter between the colonizer and the colonized, and the ramifications thereof. I must point out in no uncertain terms the problematic nature of this encounter. Bhabha has tried very hard to make it clear. He tries to understand and make us understand as well that the colonial period meant an encounter between two sets of peoples, two sets of culture. So it was not that everything was a one-way traffic. Even though the colonized could not possibly think of influencing or changing the colonizers in a direct or appreciable manner, palpable manner, because two sets of human beings, two sets of communities were involved in this process and project. Obviously, even the colonized could and did have something to say and do about their lot. What they did was influenced. But this influence was ambivalent. This influence was self-contradictory in some ways. Why? Because you see, when Western culture, Western language, Western customs, Western literature, all these things were imposed upon, even the education system had been imposed upon the colonized. They imitated, they followed, they learned. But in this learning, there was always a potential. The potential of subversion. Similarly, there was also another process and a potential. The potential of co-option. So in a properly Bakhtinian dialogic situation, the contending discourses of colonialism and resistance meant that each one of the contending voices or discourses tried to silence the other and make the dialogue into a kind of a monologue. So there was a tussle. On the one hand, the mimic environment meant that there was potential So this is what we have to harp upon. If we want to write a critical estimate of Bhaba's essay of mimicry and man, because as I have pointed out, the title presupposes not only the human subject of man and the human subjectivity. It meant that this man was inferior. The other to the European self, as Said has pointed out before. Okay, let's move on to the next topic for discussion.
So write a note on the aptness of the title of Bhaba's essay of Mimicry and Man.
Hello.
Sir, the aptness of the title.
Yeah, the aptness of the title, the significance of the title has already been discussed. You know, mimicry is the most important conceptual contribution that Bhaba wants to make in this essay. And obviously, he is going to talk about, and he has actually talked about, the influence of mimicry on man, the colonial man, the mimic man, the colonized. Okay, the next topic.
Mimicry is like a camouflage, not a harmonization or repression of difference. Elucidate.
It's a camouflage. It's a camouflage. It's not, yes, read it again. I want all of you to listen it carefully. Listen to it carefully.
Not a harmonization or repression of difference.
Yes, it's a camouflage. Now, when the chameleon tries to camouflage, when it tries to be like the environment that it finds itself in, when the military personnel actually tries to be like the environment that they find themselves in, are they becoming the environment? Tell me. Tell me, Sandipan, when I want to disguise myself, when I want to mimic the environment that I am finding myself in, do I try to become like the environment, or I want to conceal myself?
Sir, it seems that it's a kind of mimicry, I mean a kind of imitation of language, cultures, or ideas. So from this point of view, it's not totally concealed, but uh, it's a kind of an imitation of ideas, I guess.
Pondipon, this is something that I am finding very difficult and disturbing about you. Think clearly. What did I ask you? When the chameleon or when the military personnel tries to use mimicry, use camouflage, what are they doing? Are they becoming like, are they becoming the environment, or are they trying to conceal themselves?
Conceal themselves.
Yes, they are trying to conceal themselves. This is the potential that Baba is trying to make clear. Please try to understand this. Please try to understand this. This is the potential for subversion. I have already told you that there is a contending potential, a counter potential, that of co-option. I'm not going back on my words. I'm not doing that. What I am trying to do is, I am trying to point out that there is an element of concealment. There is an element of trying to look like the prevailing environment. So there is always an incentive. When we do it, there is always an incentive, either comfort or safety, or improvement of situation, whatever it may be. In the colonial situation, if you could learn English, you think about the Kotmas in Things Fall Apart. If you read the text, you will see that the Kotmas could speak English. They were Nigerians. Like Mr. Kiaga, the Kotmas too could speak English. And when the court used them as interpreters, as Dobhashis, what did they do? The court asked for a particular fine, say 50,000 rupees. The court must, because they knew the language of the natives, and because the colonizers didn't, they could actually cheat both. They could tell the natives who could not understand English that the court had levied a fine of, say, 75,000 rupees. Thereby, they could misappropriate 25,000 rupees to themselves. Similarly, they could tell the court and the colonizers that the natives would be able to only pay 40,000 rupees. Thereby, they could also cheat the colonizers of 10,000 rupees. So they could cheat both the colonizers and the colonized. And mimicry led to this process of mimicry led to the making of a class of people who were called the compradors, the Mutshuddis in the Indian or Bengali context, the Madhya Sattva Bhogis, the middlemen. Are you getting my point? Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what. Okay, the next topic, please.
How does mimicry emerge as the subject of the scopic drive and the object of colonial surveillance? Explained with reference to the text.
The subject of the scopic drive and the colonial surveillance. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Read this section again.
How
Read this
does
quotation. How does mimicry
emerge as the subject of the scopic drive
yes
and the object of colonial surveillance?
now the scopic drive and the surveillance. Okay, one thing is there. How many topics have I discussed today?
So 3.
Yesterday I had discussed one topic. Today I have discussed 3. And tomorrow is the last class that you will have before the holidays. Yes?
Yes, sir.
So I will drop this now, because if I actually go on discussing too many points in one day, it will be difficult for you to understand.
Okay, sir.
Okay, I would now request all of you to ask any question that you find interesting or baffling. Yes, Sandipon, can you hear me? Sandipon, can you hear me? Is it there?
He says he has network issue.
Okay, and Bikram, is there any question?
Sir, I was thinking about the Bidna episode that occurs in Macbeth. Is that relatable?
I couldn't get you. The Burnham Wood episode in Macbeth.
Yes, sir.
So that was there. That was yes. Camouflaging was there also. Even though in the mimic context it doesn't have any sense, except for the fact that by using the trees as shield and by making Macbeth and his defenders believe that the Woods were on the move. The Binamud was on the move. The assailants had gained a military advantage. Similarly, by adopting Western culture, Western customs, Western language, Western ways of behavior, the colonized could also, in a way, hoodwink the colonizers in some ways. On the other hand, there was another issue. By imposing mimicry, the colonizers could also surreptitiously convert the colonized into weaker versions of themselves, thereby making them subservient and docile. Understood? So it was basically a power game that was being enacted, that was being played by the contending parties. Yes. Any other question? Okay, if there are no other questions, Shubham Kita, you may stop the recording.